Okay, so Mom, here with my mom. We're back in Long Island, New York. So I'm back here for the second time in 3 years. I was here for 10 days. So what's it like to see me after all this time being in Arizona?
It's quite awesome. I have seen you grow from someone who was probably, very insecure, very, depressed, had all kinds of, issues with, yourself, with other people, just feeling left out, feeling lonely. And I think you have really come full circle, over an arc of about 5 or 6 years. And the most probably impactful have been those 3 years in Sedona, in which you have really gone from, just charting a whole new life for yourself that has been incredibly full of struggle and a lot of ups and downs, being away from your family, and just
What do you think is what was the most challenging part of raising me?
that's a really great question. I think it's interesting.
Make sure you speak up because you're a little bit.
It's interesting that when you look back, and only through the lens of time can you really kind of really intellectually respond to that comment. I think at the time I didn't realize the difficulty or the problems that you had, and that in retrospect, in other words, you were a kid that never seemed to fit in. You were someone who was being sort of put in a peg in a square peg in a round hole kind of thing, and you were this unique kid that we were trying to make sort of into something that we idealized as the perfect child.
What part of me made it difficult to connect or to?
I don't think you ever had. I think it was the fact that we wanted you to be sort of, I guess, the cookie cutter kind of kid that would just respond to discipline, be someone that would just go with the flow, and you weren't. You questioned everything. You were incredibly curious, always questioning, always asking those deeper questions that none of us would even think about. And also your ability to grasp at a very young age relationships and where, conditional love and unconditional love sort of parted ways, and how you felt that your parents' love was conditioned on you being a certain kind of person. You had to get good grades, you had to be, an athlete, and all these things. When we, as parents, we were immature. We didn't really get it. And now with the lens of time, as I said, you realize, oh my God, Peter was just this unique little gift that
So what would you say to parents?
Treasure.
What would you say to parents that have difficulty raising a child who has difficulty fitting in, like you say, or temperamentalness?
First of all, I would have revamped my whole sense of even raising a child. Now that I know so much about emotions and feelings, I would have really gotten to the heart of more of a listening dialogue with you at a younger age, and just tried to connect to those feelings and really tried to read into all that and say, hey, this kid needs, a different kind of treatment and a different kind of, sort of love. And so I think anybody that has a child that has these issues should go to see, I think, a therapist, a psychologist, get tested, and because you had these depression issues that we just said, oh, that's Peter's personality. He's just, he just likes to be a loner. And we just put you in this little
So what
box.
would you say, looking back, how do you see it differently than the kind of loner personality issue story? How do you see it now?
Well, now I see that you were just looking for someone to acknowledge your space and acknowledge the fact that you were different and that you weren't going to fit that little mold that our other two children did, and you were crying out pretty vociferously that you wanted help. I mean, you said to your dad one day, Dad, you're not loving me unconditionally. You want me to be this perfect kid. You want me to have the perfect grades. You want me to have, be the athlete. And I think we were so immature as parents that looking back, I would counsel anyone who had a child that seemed to be feeling uncomfortable
In other
their
words,
surroundings to
I
get help.
was lashing out, and as a rebellious tactic, kind of not getting good grades or not doing good in sports because I felt, what's the point? Because it doesn't matter anyway, right?
Right.
I think that's what
It was funny. It was
Yeah.
interesting. You were probably the smartest of the smartest kids, but because you questioned authority when you were in high school, and you were like, "Ma, I don't understand what this all means. Like, what's the point? Like, everybody's just out to make a lot of money. I don't view success in those terms." And it was just a whole different. You were so way ahead of yourself in terms of parts of you that were very, very mature and really insightful.
And what do you think is the most, as a parent who's raised 3 kids, 1 daughter or 2 sons, what's the most rewarding part of being a parent? I know there's a lot of difficulties, hardships, sacrifice.
Right. Well, my father, who raised 10 kids, said, "Kids make your life," and I think that it's all an investment, and you put into your children a certain amount of love, and you hope that they sort of blossom, and you give them wings, and you hopefully.
So what's the
and
reward?
And the reward is just seeing this full-fledged human being who has really conquered, or at least sort of really is conquering the world and is setting it on fire in a way that you never ever could have imagined, having gone from the point of the lowest level. And it's just to see you just grow in leaps and bounds is just one of the most rewarding experiences as a parent. And it's just, you put an investment in your child, and then at points you feel like you've been a failure. But I feel like I have done the best that I could with the knowledge that I have had, and helped you in the best way that I could.
Which is really the best that anyone can do as a parent. And what is the most difficult or frustrating part of being a parent? With me, but also with
I think the most frustrating part is that you know the answer because you've potentially been through it in your own life, and you can't somehow articulate that to your child. In other words, you may be able to actually tell them what they're doing wrong, but they have to make their own mistakes. You have to let them make their own mistakes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're not going to grow, they're not going to develop. And that's the hardest part, is just letting them make their own mistakes, and then just kind of being almost like a coach in the background.
Is it any different? Because I was the baby, I was 7 years younger. My siblings are 5 and 7 years older. Was it any different for me than it was for the older children?
I think it was harder for you because Christy and Danny were much older, and they were sort of closer in age. And then you came along, and you were, 10, between 5 and 7 years younger. And it was harder for you because you were, sort of, blazoning your own trail, and you had a different way of coping, and we had to adapt to that. We were just used to these other two. So I think
Well, let me ask,
that was
for
the challenge.
the purpose of people with personality issues with their kids, sensitivity, what was the most challenging roadblock, I think, when we would try to connect? Or did you feel a certain hopelessness even with me as a child?
I don't think I ever felt hopeless, but I think I felt like I wasn't getting through to you, or I was pretty clueless as to what your issues were. As I said before, I thought you were this shy kid, and you weren't. You were just a whole different human being I always admired your zest for the unknown, and curiosity was just like your middle name. That's
but what were I'm saying, what were these roadblocks that made it hard to bridge that gap?
I think for the most part you shut down with us, and I sort of attribute that to myself. I think it was our fault that you shut down, and you just did things on the sly, quit the sports team that your dad wanted you to be on. And
like rebellious.
In other words, you rebelled, and then we you know, responded the only way parents do, you know, that old school mentality of, you know, tough love, which was probably the last thing we should have done.